Now that 2024 has come to a close, I thought it could be potentially informative to go through and take a look at the areas where I was able to save money on books. There's a few areas that are more so specific to if you yourself are a reviewer, but if you're just somebody who's a voracious reader, there are things that can be helpful to all of you as well. Getting into it, the first area I want to talk about, and the one that is the most obvious, would be the library. I do want to note, I think a lot of you are probably aware of this, but I did a poll recently on my Instagram and found that about half of the amount of people that responded to the poll actually weren't aware of this. But if you are interested in something and your library currently doesn't have it, a lot of libraries actually have some form of a suggest a purchase page where you can request not just physical copies, but ebooks and audiobooks as well. I have found anytime that I've requested a book in the Phoenix library system that it's been purchased. And if you're curious, thinking you read a lot of newer releases, maybe it's just because those are more in demand. My husband has very different reading tastes to me. He also reads a great deal. And he sometimes reads very, very niche things that aren't even available at a lot of retailers. And the library has purchased those as well. So you might be surprised at how willing they are to check those things out. That's one way that you can save money. I would say there was a couple of times that I requested things be purchased and they were approved, but the majority of the things that I was able to save money through came through things like audiobooks and then the physical copies that were already available. So we'll talk about that a little bit more in depth. And then, as I noted before, there are a couple areas that are more specific to if you're a reviewer. You do not have to be a booktuber. You don't even need to be somebody who reviews things an extreme amount. If you review in some fashion, there's a decent chance that you can actually be able to have some of the perks that come along with being a reviewer. Let's start though with the library and get into that, because I think the amount total is borderline staggering, especially if you read even close to the amount that I read or more, because a lot of you read an extraordinary amount of books per year. So let's start with Libby and with Hoopla. For me, Libby is something that I'm able to use more often because they are more likely to have the books that I'm looking for. I know that sometimes the apps that people have available to them are different depending on their regions, but the way Libby works, if you don't know, is that it's almost like checking out a physical copy. They have ebooks and audiobooks available, but the reason I say it's similar to a physical copy is because if there's a wait list, I should say, if there's a line for checking out the book, you have to wait as if the physical book were being read currently by someone else. Whereas Hoopla is nice because if something is available, you can just check it out. I love Hoopla for that reason. However, they don't have nearly the same amount when it comes to accessibility as Libby does. Libby has a lot more things available. I've mentioned before the deep search function for things that are newer that aren't maybe in your library's catalog just yet, so they won't show up on an initial search, but they'll show up if you do the deep search, and then you can ask it to notify you when the book becomes available, and then you can be one of the first people in line. So that's really helpful when it comes to newer releases. But the point is, I was able to get 42 audiobooks through the Libby app and an additional 6 through Hoopla, amounting to 48 books through just those library apps for audiobooks alone. I did have one book that I initially was going to actually check out via an e-reader. I don't tend to check things out that way, but I knew I wasn't going to ever have a chance of getting the physical copy for this one particular book. So I was just like, oh, well, it's available. I'll go ahead and check this out from Libby as well. And the amount, as far as money that was saved, is oftentimes audiobook, the various different services that are available. For the most part, I would say on average charge roughly $15 for a credit. So if you combine that with the amount that I checked out, you're looking at over $700 saved by not using audiobook apps, and specifically ones that cost roughly $15 a month. If I'm not using those and instead am checking all these out from the library, that's roughly the amount of money. I think $700, over $700, is a pretty nice chunk of change all on its own. But there's some other areas as well. Libro FM is an audiobook service that it's a good alternative, I think, to Audible if you are searching for one that you just want to stick to one. And maybe there are certain things that aren't available through your library and you feel like, okay, I'm willing to have at least one service. Libro FM is nice because you can attach it to indie bookstores. So your credits are actually going towards something that is supporting books in your communities, which I think is fantastic. On top of that, Libro FM has an influencer program. I've mentioned it before, but I think it's worth mentioning again. You do not need to have a huge account somewhere or some big following, you can just have a form filled out, and if you qualify, then you have access every single month to new releases across a lot of different genres, and you get 10 free credits, or I should say 10 free audiobooks with credits they give you to choose from that selection. And I did find I was able to check out 8 different books throughout the course of the year through these free audiobooks that were offered, saving me $120 in that area. I know that not everybody is an audiobook listener. If you are somebody that primarily sticks to reading things physically, I was able to also save a lot of money in this area as well. I definitely didn't have to check out as many physical copies. If you're curious too about the audiobook and physical copy and you're new, I do a combination typically of both those things. I often will do immersion reading as well, which is where you're reading the physical copy and listening at the same time, as I find that this is a very helpful way for me to retain the information and stay really locked in and focused while I'm reading, which is important to me given that I then relay information about works to all of you and that you in turn might be spending your money on books based off of the things that I say. So it's really important for me that I'm very locked in, focused, and that I am able to deliver that information in a concise and informative way. Point is, that is why I have a combination of checking both the audiobooks and the physical books out. For physical books, I did oftentimes have copies of the things that I was checking out, whether it was because they got sent to me from ARCs or I already had copies because I'd found them at my local bookstores, somebody gave them to me, or in this case, I checked them out from the library. So there's going to be a lot less of these than there were for the audiobooks, but I did still check out for sure 17 books this year that were physical forms. I am not sure, that number could be a little higher or a little, well, it's definitely not lower, but it could be a little higher, but those 17 I was absolutely certain I got from the library. The audiobook's a little easier through the Libby app because they'll show you your history. It's a little harder for me to find the history of the ones that I checked out from the library, but 17 books I was able to for sure get. And then it's a little more difficult to pin down exactly how much that means you saved, because a lot of libraries will have some little thing that tells you this is how much money you save when you check out the books. However, I'm not sure exactly where that number is being pulled from. So I thought realistically, if I were to purchase these books, ideally, I would want to get them from some kind of retailer that also, like Libro FM, supports indie bookstores. And for me, that would be bookshop.org. So I found the amount of these books on bookshop.org. I added it all up, and it came to approximately $350 saved by checking these out from the library. Now we have the last area of this, which would be ARCs and things that were sent to me. And in this area, of course, all of these are going to be new. That's the whole point, is that ARCs are newer things that hopefully in a reviewer talking about them, that they will then generate a little bit more hype, a little bit more awareness, and a lot of authors' success is dependent on how well their books do when they first come out. And so in this area, I was sent, there's a little asterisk here, as I would say you could either decide I was sent 12 books total, or you can decide I was sent 21. So I want to clarify what I mean by that. I recently, in 2024, put in a lot of effort to ensure that I was having time dedicated to indie books. And I started a couple of series. One of the series would be the Echo Saga, and I read the first couple books in that series. I was checking them out from the library initially. The author saw that I was reviewing the books and very kindly and generously sent me the entire series. And that was a lot of money saved, as they sent me the hardbacks. I was astounded. When they sent it to me, I was like, oh my gosh, they're hardbacks too? So I am really appreciative of that. And like I said, I was originally getting those from the library, and then the series got sent to me. It got sent to me after I'd already started checking them out, though, which is where I feel like it's a little different than getting an ARC. Usually ARC copies, too, you can't turn around and sell them. I don't intend to sell those. But anyway, with ARCs, you usually will donate them or pass them along to someone else. Unless you really love them, then you can just keep them. But total, if you count those 9 books, was given 21. One of the 21 was the copy of The Will of the Many that I did a giveaway for, but still I consider that something, it was literally sent to me, but I also consider that in this, even though I didn't keep it, because if I'd wanted to do a giveaway for that book myself, I would have had to have spent the money. And because all of these were new, the amount was pretty high for these 21 books, and especially with those being all hardback. So if I added it all up, it was over $500. That means with everything combined in all of these areas that I was able to save roughly $1,700 in a year. And that to me is a very significant amount. I think that's probably for a lot of other bookworms also a really significant amount. Maybe you're somebody who has a lot of money and that's not really anything to blink twice over. But I was actually doing the math today and looking when it comes to AdSense revenue from this channel, I make quite a significant amount less than what the minimum wage yearly amount would be. And by being able to save in areas like this, it's part of what allows me to do my job and what allows me to continue doing this for a career. So I'm really grateful for the library. I will always continuously try to hype them up. I also am very, very oftentimes hyping up my local used bookstores. I really didn't go to my local used bookstores or get books from them very often. And sometimes when I did, I had store credit, but I wasn't keeping very good track of that this year. That could have contributed to the amount saved. This, I really feel, is a good indication of how much you can save by utilizing your library and also just understanding certain perks that are available to you. And then as far as the ARCs go, I didn't in any way want to talk about that portion as a means of trying to look a certain way. I did it for the sake of transparency. I do think that some people, I would think most people don't have this attitude, but it can be seen as showing off, like, I'm so successful, look at how many ARCs I get. I don't know, I think that's pretty rare. I think a lot of bookworms are like, oh my gosh, I got sent a book. They get really excited about it, myself included. I remember my first ARC, it was for Season of Storms by Andrzej Sapkowski, and given that I kind of started my channel in a lot of ways talking about Witcher, that meant a lot to me. So I am continuously appreciative of being sent ARCs, and I recognize that is an enormous perk of doing what I do. I do hope that in talking about it, it by no means comes across as showing off or trying to make anybody else feel bad, because maybe you've just started reviewing and you actually aren't really getting sent ARCs currently, or you don't really know how to navigate that. I would say check out NetGalley. A lot of times, even though NetGalley is primarily focused on digital books, just by sort of making your presence known as a reviewer and consistently reviewing things, you will sometimes have various different publishers then reach out to you via some kind of email, and then it's easier to request not just digital but audiobooks and physical copies too. I would say Orbit is one of the best when it comes to how they respect the reviewer. I get sent a fair amount of ARCs from Orbit, and they do now have audiobooks available oftentimes too when they're sending out their newsletters. And so I think that that's absolutely fantastic. I've always praised Orbit's relationship with reviewers and how much they seem to really value them. They seem to really value their authors from everything I've seen as well. So I even if it's not a book I end up loving, I still just think how Orbit operates is great. And if you're newer to reviewing and getting ARCs, Orbit is, I would say, a good one to try to really check out, especially if you like the kinds of books that Orbit puts out. And they also, on NetGalley, will sometimes have auto approvals. Once you've found that you are being able to show you consistently review things, there will be certain publishers that you just are auto approved for, which means if you request something, you get it, which is great. There's the occasional time I get sent something that I did not ask for. So just to be clear, some of those numbers, it was that. I didn't ask for it and it got sent, and I was like, oh, okay, I mean, I will try to get around to this. I might not, though. And that can happen. That's another side of the equation. But I hope that all this was helpful, either because you have now, just in general, had that kind of peek behind the curtain and seen like, oh, okay, well, yeah, I didn't know that it was possible to even get that many books from the library. I might have to check out my local libraries now. Or maybe there were certain functions through library apps or their websites that you didn't know about. Or maybe you just had fun seeing how much money you could save. And if you're a reviewer, of course, I hope that it was helpful to know of some of the other perks that can go along with being a reviewer. Regardless, though, that is it. If you have any of your own tips and tricks that you utilize, feel free to let everybody know in the comments. And then if you feel like sharing how much you saved, you don't have to go through and do what I did and look up every single book's price on bookshop.org. You can just say maybe your library has some kind of indication. You can just be like, according to my library, I saved this much. If that's something that you want to share, feel free. And also, I just have to say, you may recall that earlier in the year when I talked about the library, I talked about Josie the donkey. And I saw a very cute clip of Josie the donkey around the holidays, and she's as cute as ever. So, just saying, you can also run into precious animals when you go to your libraries. But anyway, truly, that's it. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you all later. Bye.